I'm back on my chronological reread of Stephen King's works, and this time, something a bit different. It's time to revisit The Eyes of the Dragon. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Dave Musson, and this is a place where I talk to you about all things Stephen King. Sure, I have a book club as well where I recommend horror books that aren't written by Stephen King, and I sometimes talk about horror movies in my Silver Scream section, but this is very much a Stephen King video, and this is part of my ongoing chronological reread of Stephen King's works, which I started back in April 2024 to coincide with the 50th anniversary of Carrie. And I'm now, as you know from the start, up to The Eyes of the Dragon, which came out in 1984. Now, we'll get to that because most people probably file it under 1987. Not entirely accurate. So that's why The Eyes of the Dragon is coming as it does after Pet Sematary, which I covered last month, and before The Talisman from 1984. So in this video, as I've done with all of my chronological rereads, I'm going to reread this book, obviously, and I'm going to vlog my experience. And then after the vlog, I'm going to go through a fairly comprehensive analysis section. So I'll give you an overall review of the book. I will give it a score out of 19 from my Stephen King bingo card, which was something I created for fun a couple of years ago. Basically just 19 tropes, cliches, things that come up time and time again in Stephen King books. So we'll see how many of those The Eyes of the Dragon ticks off. I will run through 3 pros and 3 cons, 3 things I liked, 3 things I didn't like. And I'll pick out some things I noticed for the first time on this reread. So character names that we see elsewhere, events, places, all of those kind of things. So I'll pick out some of my favourite lines, my favourite bits of writing, and I will give it a score out of 5. And this time I'm giving it a score out of 5 dragon's heads. And then we'll be able to see my ongoing overall ranking of Stephen King's works. However, before we get to the vlog, before we get to the analysis section, I've got a couple more things to do for you. I'm going to talk a little bit about my relationship with The Eyes of the Dragon. I'm going to show you my editions and tell you which one I'm going to be using for this reread. But first, just a little bit of history about this novel for you. So let's go. So then, The Eyes of the Dragon, which came out in 1984, as I said. So, yes, the mass paperback edition came out in 1987. And when you flip to the inside of a Stephen King book, it's usually listed after it and before Misery, or maybe before the Tommyknockers. I can't remember which of those came first. Either way, it's listed in where 1987 would be. But the interesting thing with this book is that it was first published as a limited edition, very expensive hardback in 1984 under Philtrum Press, which is King's kind of own imprint. That's also the publishing house that would later publish The Plant, which was Stephen King's experimental online novel, which we'll get to in quite a long time. But the story of The Eyes of the Dragon actually comes from before 1984. So this is quite a well-known story, so forgive me if I'm telling you something you've already heard. But basically, Stephen King wrote this for his daughter, Naomi. He dedicates the book to his daughter, Naomi, and to Ben Straub, who is Peter Straub's son. Peter Straub, who he co-authored The Talisman and Black House with. And legend has it that young Naomi King complained to her dad that he never wrote anything she would read because she didn't like horror. So he was like, well, what do you like? And she said, I like fantasy, I like dragons. So he wrote her a story with dragons in. It was initially called The Napkins, changed it to The Eyes of the Dragon. And yeah, he wrote it for his daughter in the very first instance. But King being King, couldn't resist. And like I say, put it out as this very special limited edition. And then it got turned into a mass market paperback edition a couple of years later. And when I say the hardbacks were expensive, they were super expensive. Like, I can't remember off the top of my head, but we're talking serious money here. The book was revised a little bit for the mass market paperback edition. I'm reading the mass market edition, so I suppose technically I should be doing it in 1987, but I'm just a stickler for when it first came out, so we're classing it as 1984. And I don't want to ruin the glow of Pet Sematary by jumping straight into The Talisman, which is one of my least favourite Stephen King novels. Now, The Eyes of the Dragon was quite well received critically, But a lot of Stephen King fans didn't like it. They didn't like the fact that he wasn't writing horror, he was trying something new, trying a new genre, doing this fantasy thing. It's kind of a little bit YA tinged as well. And supposedly, the fan reaction to The Eyes of the Dragon was part of the inspiration behind Misery. So as we'll get to in Misery, you've got a writer there who kills off his most famous character because he wants to try writing something different, and we see that his number one fan didn't like that. Now, the claim is that The Eyes of the Dragon reaction was a similar thing, but I'm not so sure, because the timelines, they don't really line up, because not that many King fans will have read The Eyes of the Dragon in the 1984 edition, simply because it was a limited edition and very expensive. So if we're saying that this King reaction these fan reactions, came from the 1987 edition, well, that's the same year Misery came out. So that just doesn't tally up. But anyway, I'm probably going off track here. Essentially, long story short, yeah, most people probably say it came out in 87. It actually came out in 84. That's why I'm doing it now. So let's talk about my relationship with this book, shall we? I don't have any great tales to tell when it comes to this one. I've read it twice before. Once, the first time I read it, I can't even remember when. I think it was one of the ones I read towards the end of reading King's books for the first time. Probably read it. Maybe had I read the Dark Tower stuff by that? I can't even remember. It didn't make much of an impression on me. And then I read it, obviously, on my chronological reread that I started in 2019. My memory of this book is, I remember that there's illustrations in it, and obviously I remembered the story about it being written for Naomi King. So in my head, it's just this fairly middle of the road, very unoffensive, kind of YA-tinged fantasy thing that has links to the Dark Tower. We get a bit more about Randall Flagg and his backstory. And it's one of those ones that's kind of like, yeah, okay, fine. Like, it's never really made an impression on me, good or bad. And it's sort of in the lower quarter of my overall Stephen King ranking. So I'm intrigued to go into this and see if there's more of a story than I remember. I have a vague memory that the narrator on this was a little strange, would often break the fourth wall and stuff like that. So we'll see how we get on with that. But I remember the crux of the story. In fact, why don't I read the blurb on the back of one of my editions? So, here is the story, because I don't really have much more to say about my relationship with it. I've read it twice. It doesn't really register. The king is dead, murdered by an unusual poison. While evidence is gathered and the land of Delane mourns, Flagg, the king's magician, unscrupulous, greedy and powerful, plots. Soon the king's elder son Peter is imprisoned in the Needle, the top of the high tower, for his father's murder, and Thomas inherits the throne. Only Peter knows the truth of his innocence, and the true evil that is Flagg. Only Peter can save Delane from the horror the magician has in store. He has a plan, but it is rife with danger, and if he fails, he won't get a second chance. A captivating tale of heroic adventure, of dragons and princes, of mysterious mice and men, from the pen of the master storyteller. That's quite a weird blurb, because it doesn't mention the fact that Peter's brother, Thomas, who becomes king when Peter is imprisoned, also knows what really happened. So, yeah, an interesting one. Let's see. I've got another edition here. Once upon a time, there was a terror. Sorry, no, start that again. Once upon a time, there was terror, and dragons and princes, evil wizards and dark dungeons, an enchanted castle. Is it enchanted? I don't think so. And a terrible secret. With this enthralling masterpiece of magical evil and daring adventure, Stephen King takes you in his icy grip and leads you into the most shivery and irresistible kingdom of wickedness, The Eyes of the Dragon. The sorcery of Stephen King, expertly seductive, the kind of book that keeps you up red-eyed with fatigue until 2 a.m. because it is just not possible to stop turning the pages. I mean, those are some bold words. But hey, what do you make of The Eyes of the Dragon? Don't forget to get involved in the comments. And while you're doing that, well, it's almost time to get onto the vlog. It's almost time to start reading. But first, I've got to show you my editions, haven't I? And there's one of these that I would rank as among my favourite editions, regardless of what I think of the story inside. So let's have a look, shall we? Okay, so I have this kind of original paperback. I bought this mainly for the font and the design, because it's a cool design with the dragon on. The font's great. Like, it's really striking. Little drawing on the back as well. Yeah, I just really like it. I think it's a really powerful, bold 80s King cover. It's not the one I'm going to be reading. The one I'm going to be reading, as you probably guess if you're following this series closely, is my Rainbow edition. They're just really easy to read, and yeah, I don't want to damage my more vintage ones. There's my Rainbow one. Doesn't even have a bad tagline on it this time. So, hey ho. Blue's a strange colour. I would have gone for green or red, but if you watch my video going through the Rainbow editions, you'll know that they weren't making great choices with those. However, my favourite edition is this one. So it's a green version of the black one, but let me see if I can catch the light. There are scales on this book. I don't know if it's coming through. I'm hoping my ring light will sort of catch some of the scales. But trust me, there are scales that you can run your hand over. And I actually found this in my local second-hand bookshop right here in my hometown. Like, this is a US edition. There is no reason why I should have found that in a bookshop, a second-hand bookshop in the middle of England for £2. But I did, and I'm so pleased with it. Like I'm definitely not going to be reading this edition because it's just too nice, but like, the book has scales. The front cover has scales. I love it so much, and the green is just a really nice green as well, kind of a sort of petrol tinged green. Like I say, one of my favourite editions of any King book. But it's a story inside going to hold such happy memories with me. I guess it's time to get started. So here's my vlog of me rereading The Eyes of the Dragon, and then we'll get into the analysis on the other side of it. Okay, so I am 200 pages into Eyes of the Dragon. And my memory of this book was like this kind of quite whimsical, light-hearted, YA-leaning thing. This book is boring. Oh, God. Like, this is perhaps the one I've just taken the least pleasure and interest from in my reread so far. Just so boring. Like, considering the crux of this story is the king, Roland, dying, it takes like 130 pages for the king to actually die. There is so much padding in this book. It's like each little chapter is stretched out like somewhere sort of cross between a Goosebumps chapter end with, this is a weird pull, but Steve Bruce, who is a manager, a football manager here in the UK, wrote some terrible detective books in the late 90s that one of my favourite podcasts has gone through and done. And he does this foreshadowing at the end of his chapters that is like someone doing a cartoon version of Stephen King almost, but he's doing it himself here. Like, I generally have a note, Steve Bruce style foreshadowing. Just like, oh, just terrible. There's also a bit where one character realises that God is dog backwards, which was used in the In-Betweeners. I just don't understand what's going on here. Yeah, cool, we meet Flagg, but honestly, this sucks. I'm really not enjoying this book. Like, I don't even have much to say about. Certainly nothing good. Like, I think King here, the narrative style is really annoying, really grating. King is going for this kind of like, you know, the narrator in Dickens is A Christmas Carol. Like, he's going for that, but he's failing miserably. Like, it's just really weird. And yet every so often there's like some nice lines of writing, like this line here, like, spying on a person is a kind of stealing. After all, it's stealing a look at what people do when they think they're alone. Like, that's great, but just so much padding in here. And there are pictures as well. I was going to show you all the pictures. I've been noting when the pictures are, but I mean, basically they're crap. I will show you one of them, but yeah, they suck. They really suck. God, I'm not having a good time with this. Not even the fact that Flagg has got like a version of the Necronomicon. is making it interesting. I just don't like it. It's the narrator. The narrator really, really grates me. Just kind of keeps breaking the fourth wall, and it's just really annoying. You know, I love all the story behind the book, that it was one written for his daughter, and he dedicates it to Naomi King and to Ben Straub, Peter Straub's son. And there's characters called Ben and Naomi in here, but oh god, this story is so fucking boring. And I'm not even halfway through yet. This isn't going well, folks. So I was going to do like 2 more vlogs of reading The Eyes of the Dragon, but honestly, I'm having such a bad time with it. I've just ploughed through to the end, and I'm going to wrap up my vlog section here. So my last vlog was after 200 pages, so another 270 pages, and there's so little to talk about. I mean, there's a few things I'm going to mention in the things I noticed for the first time section. Of course, we see the story pan out that Peter wants his napkins so he can get some threads from them and weave a rope using the little loom in his doll's house. And he's literally spending years doing it. And then he escapes and blah, 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 blah. Flagg gets banished eventually. Although, does he? All of those kind of things. But it's just... There's about 50 pages of story, and it's 270 pages. It's the first time I can really think of reading King where I can actually vibe with some of the most common criticisms you see of King, that everything is overwritten and like there's a paragraph where a word would do. I just had a really bad experience with this story. Like I think I said previously, I thought it was this sort of cozy YA thing, but it's just so ploddy, so bloated. It's just a really frustrating experience. I mean, the only mercy on it is that the chapters are really short, so you can kind of like, you can spend half an hour and breeze through maybe 10 chapters. So you feel like, or at least I'm knocking the numbers off, but it's still a mission to get through. Characters are all boring. Like, there's nothing of value here on the Flagg story arc. I was just so glad to be done with it. And like I say, I was going to do 2 more vlog updates, but I've not got enough to talk about. There's just... I think this could be in the running for my least favourite Stephen King book. I mean, obviously, I've got more to come. I'm only in 1984. But, just even Floyd's barking is disgusting. He's not. Tesco delivery has just arrived. That's why he's actually barking. But if he could read... Yeah, okay, Floyd, thanks. Shut up now. Floyd. If he could read, I would text him and tell him every day that I hated him. But also, I don't think he'd enjoy this book either. It's so boring. So bloated. So let's get into the analysis section and get this thing ticked off, back on the shelf, never to be taken down again. Okay, so that's the reread of The Eyes of the Dragon done, and it's now time for the analysis section. So in this section, I'm going to let you know where The Eyes of the Dragon scores on my Stephen King bingo card. I'm going to go through my 3 pros and 3 cons, so my things I liked and didn't like. I'm going to pick out things I noticed for the first time on this reread, so connections to other King works. I'm going to pick out some of my favourite lines, which probably won't take long, and I'm going to give it a score out of 5 dragon heads and let you know where it ranks on the overall ongoing ranking I've got of Stephen King stuff. But before all that, let's start with an overarching review. So, Jesus, what a slog. I think I may have a new contender for my least favourite Stephen King book. So my memory of this one was this kind of basically unoffensive bit of YA tinged fantasy that was set in Midworld, had connections to the tower, and was ultimately a charming little tale that King wrote for his daughter, and I thought would just be a breezy, possibly even fun little read. Oof, I was wrong. Rather than being a fun little fairy tale, this book is 470 pages of ploddy twaddle. It's led by this pompous narrator who is clearly trying to go for the similar sort of style that Dickens had in A Christmas Carol, but is failing miserably. This story is bloated, it's padded to hell, and it's just not fun to read in any way. Even the illustrations are bad. My main takeaway from this reread is this: The Eyes of the Dragon doesn't need to exist, at least not publicly. Sure, write your daughter a story, that's great, but some things you don't need to publish. This doesn't add anything to the Tower mythos, it doesn't add anything to King's overall canon, not even the Flagg backstory is interesting. Like I say, this doesn't need to exist, and I was really glad to be done with it. Okay, now I think this analysis section might be the quickest one yet on this reread, but let's see. We're going to go into my scores on the Stephen King bingo card. So you might remember that a couple of years ago I made a Stephen King bingo card with 19 items on it. These are things that I see cropping up time and time again in Stephen King's works, and I use it as a bit of a marker to see how stereotypically Stephen King a book is. So a possible maximum score of 19. The Eyes of the Dragon comes in with 2.5. So I got a tick for the heavy foreshadowing that King likes to do, because there's loads of foreshadowing this. It's a big part of the padding of the novel. Tick for a dead dog, because there's one point where Thomas goes out and kills a dog, just because he's really angry. And then half a point for the old man, young kid relationship, because we've got Judge Pena and Dennis sort of forming a bit of a bond. And that's it, 2.5 out of 19, which puts it at the bottom of the list. Okay, time to go into 3 pros and 3 cons. So 3 things I liked and 3 things I didn't like about it. So let's start with 3 things I liked. And one of them was simply this description of Flagg, which is, knowing Flagg from King's wider canon, this is actually perfect. So later, when the carnage was over and the fever had passed, when the rebuilding was complete and there was again something worth destroying, Flagg would appear once more. I mean, that is Randall Flagg in a nutshell, right? So that works. That's a good thing. Second thing I really liked about it is the heart behind this story. I love that this is a story King wrote for his daughter because she was like, you haven't written anything I can read. That's great. But like I say, we perhaps didn't need to see it ourselves. And lastly, the thing I liked was the climax, because it actually moved quickly and was over very fast. And it meant I was finished with the book. And it was kind of thrilling. Like, suddenly the pace picks up and we've got Peter coming down the needle and Flagg trying to get in. Like, that was exciting. It moved. It still wasn't a great story, but at least it moved and it was interesting. So those are things I liked about The Eyes of the Dragon. What do you like about this book, if anything? Let me know in the comments. Okay, on to 3 things I didn't like about this book. Kind of difficult to narrow it down to 3, but let's start off with the bloatedness of this book. Like I said in the vlog, this is 470 pages and there's probably 170 pages of story. It is so padded, it's unbelievable. Yeah, not a fan. Not a fan at all. Second thing I didn't like, the illustrations. I remembered the illustrations. I remembered this thing of like, I'm sure there were some cool illustrations in it. They're all terrible. They're genuinely like the illustrations of the spider. Like, let me find. There was an illustration of a spider I don't think I showed you in my vlog that just had me howling. Like, the spider down there, what? I can draw a better spider than that, and I'm terrible at drawing. So, like, what is that about? Please someone explain. And lastly, the thing I liked the least was that damn narrator, like, constantly trying to break the fourth wall, going for this quirky Dickensian vibe and just failing miserably. Like, throwing out a line like, the man's name was Curran, and I may tell you of him in another story. And like, this came out in 1984, so 41 years ago. We still haven't had anything about Curran. Like, just such an annoying voice to drive us through what's already a pretty dull story. Just grated on me. So those are things I didn't like anyway. Let me know your pet peeves about The Eyes of the Dragon in the comments. Right, let's go through some of the things I noticed on this reread things that connect to other Stephen King works. So interestingly, that obviously it's dedicated to Naomi King, but also to Ben Straub, who is Peter Straub's son. Peter Straub, who King co-wrote The Talisman and Black House with. And obviously Randall Flagg is in this. I didn't notice that for the first time here, but it's worth mentioning in this section because Randall Flagg, we see him again, don't we? Other things we see. There's a mention of Thomas not really being a bad boy, which is like Cujo. Cujo wasn't a bad boy. The sand, the dragon sand, the way it's described when we're learning where Flagg got it from, it sounds like he may have got it from the Wastelands. And given that this is a tower adjacent story, perhaps he does. Randall Flagg can go dim, which is something we learn in other books, and we see other characters do as well. This is where he sort of goes almost semi-transparent. But I think this is the first instance of where we see him being dim here. So I quite like that. We get a mention of Rhiannon, the Dark Witch of the Coos, who is someone we're going to meet again in Wizard and Glass. So we'll get to that on this chronological reread. Maybe in about 2 years. But we will get there eventually, so put a pin in her name. We get this scene of black and white stones being drawn to decide who does something, which is something that crops up again in Storm of the Century. There's this question posed around, I think it's to do with, I can't remember the context now, but I think it was to do with like people being suspicious of Peter. And the question was like, how much did you know about it? Which is a similar question at the heart of the story, A Good Marriage. Peter is dealing with his napkins and weaving his rope in his prison for like 5 years, which gave me serious Shawshank vibes. I know Andy was in Shawshank for a lot longer than 5 years, but that patience while being incarcerated, definitely a theme. I've just mentioned this man's name was Curran. We don't know who Curran is. That was frustrating. Thomas suffered severe insomnia, which of course is the name of a book that we'll get to eventually. Naomi is named after Stephen King's daughter, and Ben is named after Peter Straub's son. There's a scene where Flagg's eye is sort of wandering through the atmosphere and passes over Dennis, and he manages to hide. It's very similar to the scene in The Stand where Flagg is trying to find Tom Cullen. We get a line of saying, in spite of his long walk the day before, we get some shared dreams of Flagg across different characters here, which is obviously something we see in The Stand. There is a huge storm as part of this story, which made me think of a Stark Blast, which we will see in Wind Through the Keyhole, and also Storm of the Century. We get some nice dog POV writing, where he sees it as the girl and the tall boy, which made me think of Cujo again. We get reference of people being lost in the storm, which again happens in Storm of the Century. Flagg, when he's trying to chase down Peter, says, "Coming, you little whelp," which made me think of Jack Torrance. We get Flagg described as some horrible it with a capital I. And the last thing I noticed, so the arrow that King Roland used to kill the dragon and that is ultimately used in the climax, faux hammer is what it's called. It's an arrow built of sandalwood, and I'm pretty sure that the handles of Roland the Gunslinger's guns are also made of sandalwood. So, yeah, there's the things I noticed. Did you spot anything in The Eyes of a Dragon? Let me know in the comments. Right, this is the point where I pick out my favourite bit of writing. There's only one thing I want to shout out here, but it's not only an entire paragraph, it's an entire chapter. It's chapter 79. And this was one where I actually liked it, so I'm just going to read the whole thing. 50 miles away, rolled into 5 blankets against the bitter cold and the roaring wind, Flagg cried out in his sleep at the precise moment Dennis followed the king into the secret passageway. On a knoll not far distant, wolves howled in unison with that cry. The soldier sleeping nearest Flagg on the left died instantly of a heart attack, dreaming that a great lion had come to gobble him up. The soldier sleeping on Flagg's right woke up in the morning to discover he was blind. Worlds sometimes shudder and turn inside their axes, and this was such a time. Flagg felt it, but did not grasp it. The salvation of all that is good is only this. At times of great import, evil beings sometimes fall strangely blind. When the king's magician awoke in the morning, he knew that he had had a bad dream, probably from his own long-forgotten past, but he did not remember what it had been. I really like that. The fact that, Flagg being disturbed in his sleep by a nightmare can kill one person and blind another just by chance of them being near him. Does sum up Flagg pretty well. And I know I said in my review that it doesn't add anything to the Flagg backstory. I guess there are little bits that don't really add, but just reinforce what we know about Flagg. But that was my favourite bit anyway. Do you have a favourite bit of writing in The Eyes of the Dragon? Get involved and drop it in the comments. Okay then, we've reached the final part, score out of 5. And, well, I mean, I'm quite surprised at this. I wasn't expecting to dislike this book so much, but this is a 1 out of 5 for me. This is 1 dragon head out of a possible 5. Which puts it bottom of my list at the moment. And frankly, is where it deserves to be. I didn't have fun with this, and I don't know what else I need to say about it. I did not have a good time, and it's a 1 out of 5, and it is currently my least favourite Stephen King book on this reread. So there we go. What would you give The Eyes of the Dragon out of 5? Do let me know in the comments. And that means we've done on the reread. So come back soon, like tomorrow, and we'll check out some other 1-star reviews of this book on Goodreads, because that's what I like to do with this reread, is get the reread done and then go and check out the 1-star reviews. So we'll go and have a look at those and see what other folks who don't like it think. And then we can move on to the next one. Now, technically, next in line in the chronological reread will be The Talisman, which has long been one of my least favourite Stephen King books. But as I sit to record this, that will be my December 2025 read. December being, a nice month with Christmas in, and the month of my birthday, and this year my 40th birthday. So frankly, I'm not willing to ruin December 2025 by slogging through The Talisman. I will save that for January when everything is depressing anyway. So I'm actually going to go back and pick up a book that I kind of forgot about and skipped over. King's non-fiction work, Danse Macabre from 1981, where he's examining the horror genre. So that's going to be next on my chronological reread. Technically, it's not chronological. I'm just correcting my own path because, I forgot. I was so focused on doing the fiction that I forgot that one needs to be covered as well. So we'll pick that up and then we'll kickstart 2026 with The Talisman. But then at least it'll be done, right? So come back soon for that. Come back tomorrow for the 1-star reviews. Let me know what you think of The Eyes of the Dragon. And hey, you've come this far. Few plugs for you. Everything I want to plug is linked below, but those things are my own collection of short stories, Once More Around the Sun, my range of Stephen King themed band shirts, my Stephen King quiz book, and the fact that you can become a constant viewer, become a member of this channel, support me directly, get extra content, all of that kind of stuff. If none of that works for you, no problem. Watching these videos is more than enough. But subscribe if you haven't done so already so you don't miss any future ones. And if you are subscribed, maybe tell a friend, see if you can get them involved as well. Recently passed 10,000 subscribers, which is staggering. But hey, let's keep going. Let's see where it goes next. I mean, probably 11,000. But hey, we'll see about that, shall we? I'm rambling. Time to go. The Eyes of the Dragon sucks. But hey, it's done now. Come back very soon to see me agree wholeheartedly with some other 1-star reviews. And take care. Bye-bye.